Down the road from my place lives an older lady who has kept a garden plot for 3 decades, and you will search in vain to find a solitary weed growing there. Not even one. The dirt is spotless between her rows, her walking paths are completely clear of grass in the crevices, and her raised beds look perfectly neat through the entire growing season. For the longest time, I figured she just had blessed dirt, or was somehow deeply fortunate, or maybe she spent every daylight hour scrubbing the ground on her hands and knees. But one afternoon, I finally put my ego aside, walked over, and questioned her about her method. The truth she shared was incredibly basic and cost so little that I almost chuckled aloud. Not from humor, mind you, but out of sheer frustration that I had wasted seasons battling the dirt, the difficult way, while the perfect solution was sitting right in my pantry the entire time. Today, I am going to pass her entire method on to you. I have worked the soil here in Lancaster County for as long as I can remember, and I will gladly admit that fighting invasive plants is the one chore that never truly finishes. From the thaw of early spring straight through the autumn frost, every grower is fighting that same war. But my neighbor grasped something that most folks completely miss. Her trick is not a single miracle liquid that banishes every nuisance plant for eternity. Instead, it is a 2-step process working in harmony. First, a highly affordable homemade mixture to wipe out what is already growing. Second, and vastly more crucial, a method to stop any future sprouts from ever seeing the sun. That second step, the prevention, is the actual key to keeping her beds pristine all year. Allow me to share both parts with complete honesty. Let me share a bit of knowledge my grandfather held about these invaders that I stubbornly took decades to figure out. Growing up, I noticed he never seemed to struggle with his beds the way I eventually did. Always frantic, always rushing, crawling in the dirt all summer and still losing the fight. His patches were spotless, yet he was never out there waging a war against them. As a youngster, it completely baffled me. Looking back, the truth is obvious. He did not fight the weeds. He prevented them from arriving. He kept the earth shielded, he stayed one step ahead, and he refused to let them gain a foothold to begin with. He would always tell me that if you pull a weed, you will just be pulling it again later. But if you deny a weed the chance to emerge, it is defeated permanently. It took half my lifespan and a gentle nudge from a neighbor to grasp his true meaning, that the core philosophy is in the preventing, not the battling. That is the spirit behind everything I am sharing with you now. Before we dive into the details, a quick note. The traditional techniques my family relies on are too vast to squeeze into a single recording. I have compiled the complete collection of them into a guide. That book contains the extended details if you desire them. I will leave it at that, and not bring it up again. But first, let me speak frankly about why the common methods fail, so you can truly appreciate what we are trying to achieve. Plucking them by hand leaves you with an aching back after hours of bending, and a week later, they return as if you never intervened, simply because the bottom root snapped off and sprouted anew. Then you have those harsh chemical jugs from the garden center, the heavy-duty liquids. Do they kill the plants? Yes, but I refuse to use them because they damage the vital life hiding in the dirt, the tiny bugs, fungi, and helpful bacteria that actually allow your crops to thrive at all. I simply will not dump unpronounceable liquids onto the very earth that grows my family's supper. What about the common household tricks? Boiling water or plain vinegar will scorch the upper leaves, but the root survives beneath to push up another stem. Then there is salt. Yes, salt certainly kills a plant, but it also ruins that specific patch of dirt for several years on end. Absolutely nothing will survive there. Using salt is not a victory. It is a total surrender. I am speaking clearly on this because people hear salt works, they scatter it heavily, and then act shocked when their prized vegetables refuse to grow in that spot 3 seasons down the line. Salt does not easily wash away or break down like our baking soda does. It stays locked in the earth and sours it indefinitely, creating a barren wasteland rather than a clean patch. Never apply salt anywhere you intend to cultivate life in the future. Our baking soda, on the other hand, naturally dissolves into the earth quite quickly, and normal rain rinses it away. When used sensibly, it leaves no lasting damage. That is the main reason the soda is the superior path. We need a solution that is inexpensive, safe, and vastly superior to the rest, which brings us to my neighbor's recipe. It costs mere pennies and relies on items currently sitting in your kitchen right now. You start with a good amount of hot water. Make sure it is hot, but not at a rolling boil. Into this water, stir a heavy helping of standard baking soda until it is completely dissolved. Next, pour in 1 spoonful of regular liquid dish soap, along with a couple of spoonfuls of basic vinegar. Give it all a gentle stir, and your liquid is ready. Every ingredient has a specific job. The baking soda does the heavy lifting because it is highly alkaline, whereas most nuisance plants prefer a sour, acidic soil. When you cover the green leaves with that alkaline mixture, it burns the foliage and aggressively pulls the moisture right out of it. The vinegar is there to help the soda bite through the waxy protective layer on the outside of the leaf so the soda can do its job. Finally, the dish soap is the truly brilliant addition. Plain water naturally beads up and slides right off a leaf. The soap destroys that surface tension. This ensures your mixture spreads out into a thin, clinging layer across the entire leaf rather than dripping uselessly onto the dirt. You must mix a batch fresh every single time you plan to spray, as it loses its potency if left sitting on a shelf. Just to clarify the soap a bit more for anyone doubting it, a plant's leaf naturally repels water to protect itself, which is why morning dew rolls away and does nothing. If you spray straight soda water on a weed, the vast majority of it will just drip into the soil and be entirely wasted. The soap is the binding agent. It is the exact same logic behind why a little soap makes any garden treatment stick better. It is a minor detail, but it is the absolute difference between success and total failure. Let me be entirely truthful with you here, far more truthful than folks trying to sell you a miracle cure, because I will not promise you things this mixture cannot achieve. This liquid is magnificent for young sprouts, grassy invaders, and those annoying little annuals poking through your walkways. It burns them down swiftly and cleanly. For those, it is a remarkably complete kill. However, when dealing with stubborn, old perennials, the ones possessing a taproot plunging a foot deep like the dandelion, or bindweed stretching down several feet, or ground elder spreading its hidden underground web, a single application will not destroy the entire root system. The liquid fries the top foliage, which severely weakens the plant, but those massive roots have stored energy and will simply push up fresh green shoots. For those truly stubborn invaders, you have to apply the spray once a week for 2 or 3 consecutive weeks, striking the fresh growth every time it appears. With every application, the plant returns weaker and weaker, until you finally starve the root completely, and it surrenders. It is not a magical one-shot kill for every root on Earth. It is a rapid takedown for the simple targets, and a game of patient starvation for the hard ones. If anybody promises you that a dash of baking soda wipes out a deep bindweed root in a single afternoon, they are fooling you, and I refuse to do that. The logic is simple enough. A mature dandelion hoards its energy deep underground, much like a man storing canned goods in a root cellar for winter. When you fry the top leaves, you remove its current foliage, but it still has all those underground reserves to build new ones. It spends that saved energy to survive, and sends up fresh greens. But if you fry those new leaves before they can gather sunlight and recharge the root, the plant is spending without earning. Keep it up for a few weeks, and you bleed the root completely dry. It has nothing left, and it perishes. Patience and repetition are the entire game with tough perennials. Go into the chore knowing this, and you will not feel defeated when a weed pops back up the first time, because you are expecting it. There is a critical rule you must remember about this mixture, as it cuts both ways. This liquid destroys absolutely any green foliage it touches. It cannot tell the difference between an invading weed and your prized lettuce head. Therefore, you must only apply it where you want absolutely bare ground. Use it on your walkways, the crevices of your driveway, the outer borders of your plots, or carefully spot treat an isolated nuisance plant. You must never, ever spray this broadly over a vegetable patch or across your grassy lawn, because it will scorch your dinner and burn brown holes in your yard, just as quickly as it kills the invaders. Inside your vegetable beds, you pull by hand, or you rely on covering the soil, which I will explain shortly. If you absolutely have to spray near a precious plant, hold up a scrap of cardboard as a protective wall between them, or use a small brush to paint the liquid directly onto the unwanted leaves. Always choose a dry day, with no rain expected, and apply it as the sun is going down. There is practical common sense in every piece of that timing. You need a dry forecast because a quick rain shower will simply rinse your hard work away before it even takes effect. You need the unwanted plant itself to be completely dry, not covered in morning dew, because extra water on the leaf dilutes your mixture and steals its strength. Finally, you want the cool evening hours rather than the blazing midday heat. A hot noon sun bakes the liquid into a dry, useless crust in mere minutes before it can soak in. But if you apply it in the cooling evening, the mixture stays damp and actively attacks the leaf for the entire night. Dry plant, dry forecast, right before dusk. Those three conditions change everything. And please, keep this far away from any fish ponds or drinking wells, because a large amount can upset the water balance and harm the wildlife. So that covers the initial phase, the knockdown. Now let us move to what my neighbor understood that truly changes the game, the second phase, the preventing. This is the actual magic behind her pristine plots. Destroying the growth you can see is merely half the struggle, because the earth is absolutely loaded with dormant seeds. There are thousands resting in every square foot, just biding their time for years. The second you remove an existing plant, a new seed wakes up to claim that empty space. The genuine skill lies in keeping those seeds from ever waking up, and you achieve that through mulching. Mulching is just laying a thick cover over the exposed dirt, and it performs two incredible jobs. First, it completely cuts off the sunlight, and seeds cannot sprout in total darkness. Covered earth simply will not produce weeds. Second, it traps the water down in the soil, meaning you barely have to water your plants. This is easily the most vital yet ignored practice in the entire gardening world, and it is the sole reason my neighbor enjoys clear beds, while everyone else battles the dirt all summer. What you use for cover depends entirely on the location. For your decorative flowers and shrubs, you want a high-quality bark mulch layered a few inches deep. It looks beautiful, chokes out the unwanted growth, and rots away very slowly, nourishing the earth for a couple of seasons before you need to add more. You can frequently score wood chips for incredibly cheap, or even completely free, from a local arborist who is just happy to dump them. That beats paying for bagged bark any day. Now for your food crops, avoid the wood bark, as it can turn the earth sour for certain vegetables. Instead, use a thick layer of straw or your dried grass clippings. Pack it a few inches deep around the base of your crops. It costs next to nothing, suffocates the nuisance seeds, locks in the dampness, and breaks down beautifully to feed your harvest. For the crevices in your stone walkways and paths, once you have fried the green growth with your spray, sweep sand into those cracks. The older lady takes it a step further and blends a bit of baking soda into her sand, roughly 1 scoop of soda for every 10 scoops of sand. Sweeping that alkaline sand mixture into the gaps stops any new roots from taking hold. She tops it off once a year and enjoys total peace. The profound truth about soil cover, which makes it far more valuable than any liquid mixture, is this: the spray battles the enemy that has already arrived, but the cover stops the fight from ever starting because it refuses to let the seed wake up. A patch of naked dirt baking in the sun is practically begging for trouble. Every hidden seed is just waiting to feel that light. But earth tucked safely under a heavy blanket of straw or wood chips remains pitch black, and those seeds slumber peacefully year after year. So, while the fellow next door is out there spraying, pulling, and stressing over his naked dirt all season, your covered beds just refuse to grow the nuisance plants to begin with. You must lay it on thick, though several generous inches. A light dusting will not help. The sprouts will just push right through. A legitimately thick blanket is what suffocates them. And as a wonderful bonus, it seals the moisture deep underground, so your crops demand significantly less watering during the baking summer heat, all while slowly decaying to fertilize the soil. Mulch is the closest thing to a completely free lunch you will ever find in gardening. It halts the weeds, conserves your water, and enriches the earth in one fell swoop. I will share one more honest tool for those interested, although it is certainly not required. There is a product called corn gluten meal, which is a natural byproduct. If you scatter it over the dirt early in the spring before things start germinating, it acts as a natural barrier, stopping many seeds from ever opening, all without hurting the plants that have already started growing. It is pricier than our baking soda, but vastly cheaper than those chemical jugs from the store. You simply broadcast it over the surface as the season begins. Consider it an optional bonus, not a strict necessity, but it is highly effective and represents one more affordable, natural option to replace the expensive chemical barriers. Combine these two steps, and you hold her complete method. It is wonderfully simple. At the dawn of spring, when the very first green specks appear, you hit your walkways, crevices, and bed borders with the baking soda liquid, dropping whatever has surfaced, and returning to punish the tough perennials every week until they finally surrender. Next, you rake away the shriveled remains, which pull up effortlessly now, and you put down your heavy cover bark for the flowers, straw for the food crops, and the treated sand for the walkways. You are putting a heavy blanket over the bare earth so fresh seeds cannot wake up. Follow this rhythm, and a chore that used to steal 40 hours of backbreaking labor every year will suddenly drop to just a few casual hours for the whole season. You will simply take a gentle stroll every few weeks to spot treat the rare wanderer that blew in on the wind and rooted on top of your bark. That is the exact difference between a plot that brings you joy and one that feels like a prison sentence. My neighbor explained it to me in a phrase I will never forget. She told me, "Tending the earth is exactly like cleaning a house. You can scrub the floors a tiny bit every single day until the end of time, or you can give the place one massive, deep clean, and then just maintain it with a gentle touch afterward. The homemade liquid and the heavy ground cover act as that massive, deep clean right at the start of spring. The rest of the year is simply that gentle maintenance, a calm walk and a quick spray here and there. Put in the heavy labor once at the correct moment, and you get to enjoy a pristine, effortless harvest for the rest of the year." That single sentence holds all 30 years of her gardening wisdom. Let me offer a brief, honest thought on why your grandmother's affordable tricks faded away while those expensive chemical jugs were pushed on you instead. I am not saying this to make you angry, just to help you understand the landscape. There is massive profit in a $40 jug of poison that you are forced to purchase over and over again every spring, and in all those specialty bags lined up at the garden center. But there is absolutely zero profit in teaching a man that a cheap box of baking soda and a simple bale of straw will do a vastly superior job. You cannot hold a patent on baking soda. You cannot charge a fortune for dried grass, wood bark, or plain sand. Because of that, nobody runs advertisements for them. Entire industries are not built on educating folks about them. So, as the decades rolled on, these highly effective, frugal methods just quietly slipped out of our collective memory, while the expensive plastic jugs received all the marketing dollars. I am not suggesting some grand villain plotted to steal this knowledge from you. Nobody had to. It is actually worse than a conspiracy, because it is a cycle that runs itself perfectly. It simply makes a lot of money to sell the expensive jug, and it makes zero money to educate folks on the cheap box and bale. So the traditional wisdom was just left unspoken, not hidden by thieves, just ignored because there was no cash in sharing it. You know, the part of this whole experience that hit me the hardest was not the liquid recipe or the science behind the ground cover. It was the realization that the exact solution I had been desperately seeking for years was sitting just over the property line the entire time. It lived in the mind of a lady I waved to nearly every afternoon. The only thing I needed to do was swallow my pride and speak up. How often does that happen in our lives? We chase down the most complicated, expensive answers, buying the premium products, while the plain, honest truth is quietly held by somebody standing right next to us, if only we had the humility to ask. To me, that realization is worth vastly more than the weed recipe itself. Now, I genuinely want to hear from you folks. I ask this sincerely, because reading these comments teaches me about the gardening challenges across the entire country. Drop down in the comments and tell me which specific invader torments you the most. Is it the dandelion, the creeping Charlie, the bindweed, or the ground elder? I will happily reply and tell you the absolute best way to conquer that specific plant, because each one requires a slightly different approach. Also, please mention your county and your local weather, because the challenges change dramatically depending on where you live, and I love mapping out where you are all tuning in from. I read every single one of them. Next time we meet, I'm going to walk you through brewing a homemade fertilizer from completely basic, cheap ingredients that will make your tomatoes explode in a way you will not believe. It is the traditional way of nourishing your harvest for pennies, instead of dumping cash on those premium bottled plant foods, because a properly fed tomato will pay you back 10 times over. The folks who came before us did not keep their land pristine by relying on a garage shelf full of expensive poisons. They used basic, affordable items and a healthy dose of common sense. A simple box of soda, a bale of dried grass, a thick blanket of wood chips over the exposed dirt, and the wisdom to prevent the fight rather than constantly waging it. There is profound wisdom in treating your garden as a living ecosystem that needs to be balanced, rather than a war zone that must be conquered with chemicals. Cultivating a clean plot through knowledge and prevention, rather than a plastic jug of poison, is how we remember the way our grandparents truly worked the earth. The folks who carved out this country with their bare hands understood that deeply, and we are only just now beginning to relearn it.